The Maplewood Fresh Mart on Corridor Drive was the kind of grocery store that smelled like warm bread and floor wax, the kind of place where the cashiers knew your name by your third visit and the produce manager would save back the good strawberries if you asked nicely. It was a Thursday evening in early November, and the store hummed with the particular energy of people trying to get home. Carts moving with purpose, children reaching for candy at the checkout displays, the self-checkout machines beeping their endless robotic patience at customers who never quite remembered which button to press. My name is Danny. I am 17 years old, and I was not there that evening. I was at home, sitting cross-legged on the kitchen floor with my homework spread across the coffee table, waiting for my mother to come back with groceries so I could eat something before I fell asleep over my calculus notes. I did not witness what happened, but I know every detail of it because the store manager called our house that night, because 3 employees wrote their accounts down and sent them to the regional office, and because my mother, who never talks about herself, sat across from me at our kitchen table 2 weeks later and told me everything with her hands wrapped around a mug of chamomile tea, her voice so steady and so quiet that I had to lean in to hear her. My mother's name is Gloria Marie Vasquez. She is 52 years old, though she looks 45 on her good days and 60 on her hard ones, and lately there have been more hard ones than she lets me see. She has silver running through her dark hair like rivers on a map, and she wears it pulled back in a ponytail so neat it looks deliberate even when it isn't. She has warm brown eyes that crinkle at the corners when she smiles, reading glasses she pushes up her nose when she is concentrating, and hands that are always slightly rough from the work she does. The real work, not the title work, the kind of work that means early mornings and long drives and walking store floors for hours with a clipboard and a brain that never fully stops calculating. She wore an olive zip-up fleece that evening. Not because she was trying to be invisible, but because it was comfortable, because November in this part of the country bites right through anything thinner, and because after 9 hours of auditing 3 different store locations across 2 counties, she was not thinking about what she was wearing. She was thinking about whether I had eaten lunch, whether the electricity bill had been paid, whether the transmission noise in her car was something urgent or something she could manage to ignore for 1 more month. She carried our reusable grocery bag, the green canvas one with the sunflower I drew on it with fabric markers when I was 9, the crayon lines long since faded to a soft yellow blur. She has used that bag every single week for 8 years. She has never once left it behind. She parked in the second row of the lot, walked in through the automatic doors, grabbed a basket instead of a cart because she only needed a few things, and moved through the store with the efficient calm of a woman who has memorized every layout in the district. Chicken thighs, 2% milk, a bag of brown rice, Greek yogurt, the good multigrain bread from the bakery section. She checked the dates on everything, old habit, professional instinct, both. She was off the clock, but her eyes never really went off the clock. She noticed that the end cap display in aisle 3 was misaligned. She noticed that the refrigerator case near the dairy section was running half a degree warm. She filed both observations in the back of her mind without breaking stride, without making a note, the way you notice things when a building belongs to you in some essential way even when your name isn't on the door. She wore the medical alert bracelet on her left wrist. It is a simple thing, brushed silver, slightly scratched now, with a small red emblem and a line of engraved text. She was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes 3 years ago, and she manages it carefully, methodically, the way she manages everything, with research and discipline and a quiet refusal to let it become more of her story than it has to be. But some evenings, when she has pushed herself past reasonable limits, her hands tremble. Not dramatically, just faintly, like a phone set to silent vibrating against a table. Barely visible, easily overlooked, unless you are standing close enough to see it and cruel enough to use it. She got in the checkout line at Register 4 at 6:47 in the evening. I know the time because the register logs it. There were 2 people ahead of her. A young father with a toddler on his hip and a box of diapers, and an elderly gentleman who was still in the process of loading his items onto the belt. The cashier, a 22-year-old named Marcus who had worked that register for 3 years, greeted my mother the way he greeted everyone, with a genuine smile and a nod, completely unaware of who she was. She set her basket on the floor, pulled her items out one by one, and waited. She was patient. She has always been patient. It is one of the things about her that I both admire and have occasionally, in my more frustrated teenage moments, found quietly maddening. She does not rush. She does not push. She believes that people are doing their best and deserve the space to do it. The elderly man ahead of her was moving slowly. He was perhaps 75, heavy-set, wearing a green veteran's cap and moving his hands across the register's pin pad with the careful concentration of someone navigating unfamiliar technology. His loyalty card was not scanning correctly. Marcus tried it 3 times, then manually entered the number, then called over to the service desk for assistance. The transaction paused. The line breathed. Everyone in it adjusted their expectations by approximately 90 seconds, which is the amount of time most reasonable people can absorb without distress. My mother waited. She thought about whether I had enough of the good shampoo left or if she needed to grab some. She thought about a meeting she had scheduled for Friday morning. She thought about nothing particularly dramatic. She was just a tired woman in an olive fleece, standing in a grocery store line, holding a canvas bag with a faded sunflower on it, waiting to pay for 7 items so she could go home. She did not know what was coming. She did not hear it at first. The sound of heels on polished linoleum, precise and deliberate, cutting through the ambient hum of the store like a metronome. She did not notice the coral blazer, or the cream designer tote, or the highlighted blonde hair. She was not paying attention to the woman who had just joined the line behind her, because why would she? She was minding her own life. The first thing she registered was the sigh. Not a tired sigh. Not an involuntary sigh. A performed sigh, the kind engineered specifically to be heard, shaped in the throat with the clear intention of communicating displeasure to everyone within a 10-foot radius. My mother heard it and did not turn around. She has worked in retail management for 19 years. She knows the difference between a sigh and a statement. Then came the second one, louder, paired with the sharp sound of a designer tote being repositioned on a shoulder with exaggerated impatience. My mother still did not turn around. She was holding the canvas bag in both hands now, her fingers running along the faded sunflower absently, the way she does when she is waiting and her hands need something small to do. Her bracelet caught the fluorescent light. Her glasses caught it too. She was looking ahead at Marcus, who was still patiently working through the elderly man's transaction. His voice kind, his movements unhurried. Behind her, a voice, clear, carrying, calibrated to be heard by every person in that line, said to no one in particular, and therefore to everyone. Some people genuinely have no awareness of how much time they waste for everyone else. My mother closed her eyes for exactly 1 second. She opened them. She did not turn around. She kept her hands still on the canvas bag and she breathed, and she waited, and she was the most dignified person in that building, and she had absolutely no idea that in approximately 11 minutes, every single person in that checkout line was going to witness something they would talk about for months. She just didn't know it yet. And neither did the woman in the coral blazer. But the store manager did. Because the store manager had just turned the corner from aisle 7 with a scheduling clipboard in her hand, and she had heard the voice, and she was already walking toward register 4 with the particular expression of someone who has handled enough human ugliness to recognize it from a distance and has long since decided that distance is not where she does her best work. The line moved 1 person forward. My mother exhaled. The clock on the register read 6:48 p.m., and everything that was about to happen had already, in the quiet mechanical logic of consequence, begun. Her name was Renee Calloway, and she had never once in her 47 years on this earth stood in a line without believing, with complete and unexamined conviction, that she deserved to be at the front of it. This was not a conscious belief. That was perhaps the most important thing to understand about Renee. She did not wake up in the morning and think, I am better than other people and my time is worth more than theirs. She did not frame it that way even privately, even in the locked chambers of her own internal monologue. It was not a philosophy she had adopted. It was simply the water she had always swum in, invisible and everywhere, absorbed so early and so completely that it had become indistinguishable from the texture of reality itself. She had grown up in Whitmore Estates, the kind of suburb where the hedges were trimmed to regulation height and the Homeowners Association newsletter was considered essential reading. Her father had been a commercial real estate developer. Her mother had been the kind of woman who referred to service workers as the help without a trace of irony and corrected the grammar of people she considered her social inferiors. Renee had absorbed all of it, the entitlement, the taxonomy of worth, the absolute certainty that the world was divided into people who waited and people who were waited upon, and that her family had always permanently been in the second category. She had married well. That was how her mother described it, as though it were an athletic achievement. Renee married well. Her husband, Brad Calloway, ran a mid-size insurance brokerage and played golf twice a week and had the particular kind of easy confidence that comes from never having genuinely failed at anything that mattered to him. They lived in a 4-bedroom colonial in the Briarwood development, drove matching white SUVs, and spent their summers at a lake house 2 hours north that Renee referred to, without a hint of self-consciousness, as the cottage, despite its 4 bathrooms and professionally landscaped dock. She chaired the Briarwood HOA. This was the crown jewel of her social identity, the thing that gave shape and purpose to her considerable organizational energy. She ran the meetings with parliamentary precision, distributed violation notices for unauthorized mailbox colors with the gravity of official government correspondence, and maintained a running mental ledger of every neighbor who had ever crossed her, inconvenienced her, or failed to acknowledge her authority with sufficient deference. She was not an evil woman in the operatic sense. She was something quieter and more common. A woman who had lived her entire life inside a system that told her she mattered more, and had never once been handed a reason to question it. She had come to Freshmart that Thursday evening because her housekeeper had failed to pick up the canopy ingredients for the HOA board dinner she was hosting Saturday, and Renee had decided, with the particular martyrdom of someone who considers delegating a gift they bestow upon lesser people, that she would simply do it herself. She had a list. She had her coral blazer and her cream Chanel tote and her heels that clicked on the linoleum like a verdict being read. She had a nail appointment at 7:15 that she had absolutely no intention of missing, and she had, in her mind, allotted precisely 8 minutes for the grocery transaction, which was, she had privately decided, more than generous. She had not anticipated the line. The line had 3 people in it, one of whom was an elderly man struggling with a loyalty card scanner, and this was the kind of obstacle that Renee's nervous system experienced not as a minor inconvenience but as a personal affront, the universe failing in its basic obligation to accommodate her schedule. She sighed, loudly, meaningfully. No one turned around. She repositioned her tote with aggressive deliberateness. Still nothing. She looked at the line, at the old man, at the young father who had now finished and was walking away, at the woman in the olive fleece who was next and who appeared to be in absolutely no hurry, and she felt the familiar tightening in her chest that she had spent 47 years learning to interpret not as impatience but as justified frustration at the incompetence of others. The woman in front of her was, to Renee's eyes, utterly unremarkable. Plain fleece, practical shoes, reading glasses, older, maybe early 50s, silver in the hair. The kind of woman Renee would pass 100 times in 100 stores and never once register. One of those quiet, background people who seem to exist in the world without taking up any particular space, without announcing themselves, without demanding to be seen. This assessment was, of course, the fulcrum upon which everything was about to catastrophically turn. But Renee did not know that yet. She made her first comment to the air, the some people remark that floated over the line like smoke. She said it with the practiced casualness of someone who has been making comments like this for decades and has never once been called to account for them. Someone who has learned that there is a particular tone, light, conversational, plausibly deniable, that allows cruelty to move through public spaces without obstruction. My mother heard it and did not respond. This was, in Renee's internal register, not dignity, it was weakness. In Renee's experience, the people who did not respond were the ones who knew they had no grounds to push back. Silence meant yielding. Silence meant she's right. She took a small step forward, adjusted her grip on the tote, and spoke again, louder this time, with the cadence of someone who has now decided that the audience she has been subtly performing for should be brought fully in. I don't understand why stores don't have express lanes that are actually enforced. Some of us have places to be. She said this to the side of my mother's head. My mother was now unloading her 7 items onto the belt with quiet efficiency. The chicken, the milk, the rice, the yogurt, the bread. Her hands were slightly trembling. The faint tremor that comes at the end of a long day when her blood sugar has been running low, and she has not eaten since 1 o'clock. Her bracelet caught the light. Renee noticed the trembling hands. And something in her, not the good part, not the part that in another life with different parents and different water, might have felt concern, filed it away as confirmation, as evidence, as ammunition. She was preparing for something bigger. She could feel it building in her chest, that hot, self-righteous pressure that in her experience always resolved best when released completely, when held nothing back, when the full weight of her frustration was transferred cleanly onto someone who could not effectively transfer it back. She was about to say the thing that would change the trajectory of her evening, her month, and ultimately several months beyond that. She was about to make the mistake that people like Renee almost never get the opportunity to make in front of exactly the right witnesses. She rolled her shoulders. She lifted her chin. She aimed her voice like a tool. And Marcus, behind the register, sensed what was coming. Because Marcus had been working this line for 3 years and he had excellent instincts. And he very slightly, very carefully, looked up from the register and made brief eye contact with the woman in the olive fleece. My mother gave him the smallest imaginable shake of her head. It's fine. Let it go. Marcus looked down. The store manager, 20 feet away in aisle 7, had stopped walking. And Renee Calloway opened her mouth. Section 3. 7 items and a faded sunflower. My mother placed the chicken thighs on the belt first. She always does this, proteins first, then the heavier dry goods, then the cold items, then the bread last, because she has spent enough years in grocery management to be constitutionally incapable of letting bread get crushed under milk. It is the kind of habit that lives so deep in a person it operates without thought, like breathing, like the way she always checks the date on dairy items even when she just watched the stock boy rotate them 20 minutes ago. She is, in the most fundamental sense of the word, someone who pays attention, someone who notices, someone who cares about the small, unglamorous details of things being done correctly. She set the bread down last, gently, on the edge of the belt away from everything else. Her hands were trembling more now. She noticed it. She reached into the pocket of her fleece for a small tin of glucose tablets she keeps there. A habit since the diagnosis, so automatic it required no more conscious thought than reaching for a phone, and she pressed one quickly between her teeth with the practiced nonchalance of someone who has made peace with the machinery of their own body and its requirements. She was not dramatic about it. She was never dramatic about it. Behind her, Renee made a sound. Not a word. A sound. A short, sharp exhale through the nose. The precise sonic signature of someone who has decided that watching another person manage a health condition in their presence is an imposition on their time. My mother swallowed the tablet, folded the tin back into her pocket, looked forward. Some people genuinely have no awareness, Renee said to the general air. And then, 3 seconds later, tilting her head with the kind of smile that is anatomically a smile and emotionally a weapon. Are you going to be much longer? Some of us have actual places to be tonight. She said actual in the specific way people use that word when they want to imply that someone else's destination is not actual, that it is lesser, that it does not count, that it is the kind of place people like her have never had to go and feel a distant, ugly satisfaction in never having to go. My mother looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at the register. The woman who had been in front of my mother, the young father was long gone, had cleared out. It was her turn now. She stepped forward, placed her canvas bag on the bagging area, and gave Marcus a small nod. Marcus began scanning. Chicken thighs. The machine beeped. Milk. Beep. Brown rice. Beep. 2 Greek yogurts. 2 beeps. Bread. Beep. 7 items. Less than 4 minutes if everything went smoothly. Renee did not wait for things to go smoothly. Can I ask what is taking so long? It's just groceries. My mother said nothing. She was watching the screen where the total was assembling itself, reaching into her fleece pocket for her wallet. Her hands were still not entirely steady. She found her loyalty card, a simple plastic card, worn at the edges from years of use, and held it toward the scanner. She swiped it. The machine did not respond. She turned it over, swiped again. Still nothing. Marcus reached for the manual entry option. I can type it in for you, no problem. 04. Renee's voice was louder now, not shouting. More precise than shouting, louder in the way a sharpened point is more dangerous than a blunt one. Can someone open another register? This is genuinely ridiculous. I have been standing here for 10 minutes. She had been standing there for 4 minutes. But time is elastic in the minds of people who believe their time is categorically more valuable than the time of the people in front of them. Marcus did not look up from the keyboard. He was entering the loyalty number careful digit by digit. His jaw was set in a way that, if you knew Marcus, you would recognize as a very deliberate decision not to say what he was thinking. The loyalty number processed. A small green checkmark appeared on the screen. My mother exhaled. Finally, Renee said, not quietly. My mother reached forward to confirm the total. Her hand passed through the fluorescent light and the bracelet caught it. That simple silver band, scratched and real in hers, and Renee looked at it and looked at the faintly trembling fingers and made a decision. A small, mean, irreversible decision. You know, she said, and her voice had changed now, dropped into something lower and more precise. The tone of someone who has decided that pleasantries are no longer required. There are other lines. Some of us do not have medical issues slowing us down. It might be more considerate to let people through who can actually manage the transaction. The line went quiet. Not just the people behind Renee, the register beside them, the self-checkout area, the customer service desk where a young woman had been counting change. All of it went quiet in the way that spaces go quiet when something ugly has been said and everyone in the vicinity has registered it and nobody has yet decided what to do. Marcus stopped typing. The young woman at the service desk looked up. And my mother. My quiet, patient, exhausted mother in her olive fleece, with her worn loyalty card and her faded sunflower bag and her bracelet and her trembling hands and her 9-hour day and her daughter waiting at home and 19 years of service to this company. My mother stood completely still for a moment that lasted no time at all and also seemed to last a very long time. She did not cry. I want to be clear about that. She is not a person who cries in public, and she did not then. She pressed her pin. The transaction completed. The receipt printed. She picked up her canvas bag. She placed the bread in it last, gently. She folded the handles together with both hands. And then, before she turned away from the register, she did something that Marcus would later describe in his written account as the most dignified thing he had ever seen in 3 years at that store. She turned to the elderly man in the veteran's cap, who was still collecting his bags at the end of the belt. He had seen everything, heard everything, was looking at her with an expression of deep and helpless sympathy, and she smiled at him. A real smile, warm and genuine and unperformed. Have a good evening, she said, just to him, just those 4 words. She turned toward the exit. She did not look at Renee. She had taken exactly 3 steps when she heard the door behind her. Not the front door, but the door from the back corridor, the one that connected the management offices to the main floor, open. And then she heard her name. Not just her name, her full name, her title, said in a voice that carried across the entire front end of that store with the clean, deliberate force of a bell being struck. She stopped walking. She turned around. And the next 30 seconds of her life became the 30 seconds that when I am old and gray and telling stories to people I love, will return to again and again, not because justice is always delivered so cleanly or so publicly or so perfectly timed, but because sometimes, just sometimes, it is. And when it is worth remembering exactly how it felt. Section 4. What Marcus knew. Marcus Thibodeau had worked Register 4 at the Maplewood Fresh Mart for 3 years, 2 months, and approximately 11 days, and in that time he had developed the particular kind of human radar that only comes from spending hundreds of hours watching people under the low-grade pressure of public transactions. He could tell within about 45 seconds of someone joining his line whether they were going to be pleasant, distracted, in a hurry, or difficult. He was rarely wrong. He had known Renee Calloway was going to be difficult approximately 15 seconds after he first heard her sigh. He had known it with the same quiet, resigned certainty with which he knew that it was going to rain when the air pressure dropped and the fluorescent lights in the back cooler started to hum at a slightly different pitch. Some things did not require analysis. Some things were simply apparent to people who paid attention, and Marcus paid attention to everything. He was 22 years old, the oldest of 4 siblings, and had been working since he was 15. Not because anyone forced him to, but because his family needed it and he understood that, and that understanding had given him a steadiness and a practical wisdom that sat in him with much more weight than his age typically suggested. He wore his Freshmart vest like it was a perfectly reasonable thing to wear, without embarrassment or irony, because it represented hours worked and bills helped and a contribution made, and he had never in his life understood the logic of people who looked at service workers and saw something diminished. He had not known who the woman in the olive fleece was when she stepped up to his register. He knew her face, had seen it perhaps 3 or 4 times in the past 6 months, always in civilian clothes, always carrying that green canvas bag, always pleasant, always checking the dates on her dairy items with the focused efficiency of someone who could not entirely turn off their professional instincts. He had assumed she worked somewhere nearby. An office, maybe, a school. Somewhere organized and detail-oriented, because she had that quality about her, the quality of someone who sees the structure of things. He had not known she was the regional manager. But what Marcus knew, what he had known from the moment Renee's first comment floated over the line like a small, pointed missile, was that the woman in the olive fleece was not going to fight back. He had known it with the same certainty he knew the rain. Some people could be recognized immediately as people who absorb, who endure, who carry the weight of other people's ugliness without putting it down on anyone else. She was one of those people. He had seen it in the way her shoulders adjusted almost imperceptibly when the first comment landed. Not a flinch, a settling, like someone who has been hit before and knows how to receive it without being knocked over. He had wanted to say something. He had wanted, specifically, to look at Renee and say something very clear about how this store treats its customers and what kind of behavior is and is not tolerated at his register. But he was 22, and he had 3 years of low-wage employment teaching him the complicated geometry of when speaking up makes things better and when it makes things considerably worse, and he had decided to let it run its course, to document it in his memory with the faithful accuracy he applied to everything, and to file a report at the end of his shift. Then Renee said the thing about the medical issues, and Marcus stopped typing. He looked up. He could not help it. Something in him that was more reflexive than professional simply refused to keep its eyes down. The woman in the olive fleece was still. Not tense still. Not about to respond still. Just still, in the way that people are still when they have gone to a very quiet place inside themselves and are choosing, with great deliberation, what to do next with a moment they did not ask for and do not deserve. Marcus looked at the bracelet. He looked at her hands. He looked at the loyalty card she had just tucked back into her wallet with fingers that had steadied themselves through sheer force of will. And he felt something that he would later, in the written account he submitted to the regional office, describe simply as anger on behalf of another person, which is, if you think about it, one of the more honorable emotions available to human beings. He wanted to speak. He opened his mouth slightly. She shook her head at him. The smallest possible movement. Don't. He closed his mouth. He printed the receipt and handed it to her, and she took it without looking at Renee and said thank you to him in a voice that was entirely, impressively, humanly normal, as if she were just a woman who had just bought 7 items and was ready to go home. He watched her turn toward the exit. He watched her take 3 steps. And then he heard the back corridor door open, the one beside the service desk, the one that was supposed to be exit only but which the store manager, Jess Callahan, used as an entrance when she came from the back offices at speed. And Jess's voice came through that door before Jess herself fully did, because Jess Callahan had excellent hearing and had been covering the distance from aisle 7 to register 4 at something faster than a walk ever since she had heard some people do not have medical issues slowing them down. Marcus exhaled. Not with relief exactly. With the complicated feeling of someone who knows that what is about to happen is both necessary and irreversible, and is not sorry about either quality. He watched Jess clear the service desk. He watched her lock eyes with the woman in the olive fleece from across the store, and he watched Jess's expression do something he had never seen it do in 3 years. It went not just professionally firm but personally furious, in the way that faces go when something has violated a standard that the person holds not just as policy but as something deeper, something closer to a code. He watched Jess draw breath. He picked up the phone handset beneath his register counter, keeping his eyes forward, and he dialed the floor supervisor's extension. "Hey," he said quietly when it picked up, "you might want to come to the front." He set the handset down. He folded his hands on the counter. He waited. 3 years of watching people move through this particular rectangle of the world, and in 30 seconds he was going to watch something he would tell his kids about someday. Not because it was dramatic, not because it was loud, but because sometimes the universe assembles all its moving parts into exactly the right configuration at exactly the right moment, and what results is something so precise, so perfectly consequential, that it doesn't feel like an accident. Feels like justice. The quiet, specific, unhurried kind. The kind that lands harder because it doesn't have to shout. Jessica Callahan had worked in grocery retail since she was 19 years old. First as a stock clerk during college, then as an assistant manager, then as a floor supervisor at 2 different locations, then, at 31, as the youngest store manager in the Maplewood District's recent history. She was 34 now, and she wore that red manager's vest the way some people wear conviction, as something that has become so integrated with identity that it no longer feels like clothing exactly but like a statement of purpose, a declaration of what she was here to do. She was not a large woman in the way that word is usually meant, but she was large in presence. The kind of tall that carries authority not from height alone but from what the body does with it, the way it moves through a space with the calm assurance of someone who has long since decided that a room is not a challenge to be entered but a situation to be handled. She had dark eyes that noticed everything and missed nothing, and a face that most people found, upon reflection, difficult to lie to effectively. She had come on shift at 2 p.m. that afternoon and had spent the first hour reviewing inventory reports, the second handling a vendor delivery discrepancy, the third working a gap in the schedule caused by a cashier calling in sick, and the 4th through 7th hours moving through her store with the steady, comprehensive attention that good managers give the spaces they are responsible for. Checking temperatures, checking faces, checking the invisible weather of the floor that tells you, if you know how to read it, whether tonight is going to be ordinary or something else. She had been in aisle 7 when she first heard the voice. She knew the voice, not the specific person. She did not yet know Renee Calloway by name, but the type, the tone, the particular acoustic signature of public entitlement in mid-performance. She had been managing retail floors for 15 years, and she could identify that sound the way a musician identifies a chord slightly out of tune, not by analysis but by the dissonance it created in the ambient harmony of a functioning space. She had turned the corner from aisle 7 toward the front end without hurrying, because she had learned years ago that approaching difficult situations at speed usually escalated them, and she preferred to arrive at situations already calm. She had registered the lineup at Register 4. The elderly man had cleared. Marcus was processing a transaction for a woman she recognized vaguely. Olive fleece, canvas bag, reading glasses, had been in several times, and behind her, a woman in a coral blazer was performing the elaborate, theatrical impatience of someone who considers waiting a form of disrespect. She had heard the some people comment. She had continued walking toward the front, clipboard in hand, keeping her body language unhurried and observational. The way she moved through the floor when she was watching something develop and had not yet decided when to step in. She had heard some of us have actual places to be. She had stopped walking at the edge of the checkout area, perhaps 20 feet from Register 4. She had heard the word medical. She had heard slowing us down. She had heard can actually manage the transaction. And something in Jess Callahan, the part that had started in this industry at 19 because her own mother had worked checkout for 30 years and had come home some nights with eyes that were carefully blank in the way eyes go blank when they have absorbed something they refuse to let you see. That part did not calculate or deliberate or construct a managerial response. That part simply moved. She was walking toward Register 4 before she had consciously decided to walk toward Register 4, and she was aware, as she walked, that her clipboard was no longer the point, that whatever professional scaffolding she had intended to use as her approach had been replaced by something more fundamental and considerably less interested in tact. She saw the woman in the olive fleece complete her transaction. She saw her pick up the canvas bag. She saw the small, heartbreaking, absolutely extraordinary smile she gave the elderly man in the veteran's cap before turning toward the exit, and something about that smile, its generosity, its refusal to be diminished, the way it was given openly to someone who had witnessed the indignity and could do nothing about it, landed in Jess's chest like a key turning in a lock. The woman in the olive fleece took 3 steps toward the door. Jess reached the edge of the checkout area, and she said clearly, without the theatrical force that would have made it a performance, but with the clean, carrying precision that made it something better than that, something truer, she said, "Gloria." And then, because the moment deserved its full weight, because the people in that line deserved to hear it, because Renee Calloway deserved to hear it most of all, "Ms. Vasquez, please don't go yet." The store paused. Jess walked to the register. She looked at my mother first. Just for a moment, just long enough to communicate something that did not require words. Something that passed between two professionals who understood exactly what had just happened and what was about to happen. And my mother looked back at her with an expression that was complicated and tired and, beneath all of that, quietly, carefully grateful. Then Jess turned. And she looked at Renee. Later, I would ask my mother what those 30 seconds felt like from where she was standing, and she was quiet for a long time before she answered, in the way she is quiet when she is trying to be precise, when she wants to tell the truth of a thing rather than a simplified version of it. It felt like watching a house of cards, she said finally. The kind that someone built very carefully over a very long time. And it fell very fast. And I didn't feel what I expected to feel. I asked her what she expected to feel. She wrapped her hands around her tea. Satisfied, maybe, or vindicated. Those are the words people use. What did you actually feel? She thought about it. Tired, she said. And then, after the tired, something like relief, but softer than relief. Quieter. I understood that, I think. Here is what happened in those 30 seconds, assembled from Marcus's account, from the floor supervisor who had arrived from the back just as it began, from two customers who wrote to the store the following week, and from my mother herself. Jess Callahan stood at the edge of Register 4 and looked at Renee Calloway for a period of time that multiple accounts describe as approximately 3 to 4 seconds, but that several people present described as feeling significantly longer. She did not speak immediately. She looked at Renee the way a person looks at something they are choosing how to address, carefully, without rushing. "Ma'am," she said, "my name is Jessica Callahan. I am the store manager of this location." Renee, to her credit, or perhaps to the testament of how thoroughly her social instincts operated on autopilot, attempted a recovery. Her chin lifted slightly. The tote shifted on her shoulder. She produced a version of her smile. "I wasn't speaking to you. I was simply—" "I know what you were doing," Jess said. Not loudly. Not with the theatrical precision of someone performing justice for an audience. Simply, directly, in the tone of someone who does not intend to be interrupted again. "I was in aisle 7. I heard the exchange from beginning to end." Renee's smile recalibrated. "I was frustrated. I've been waiting." "The woman you spoke to," Jess said, and she did not look toward my mother when she said it. She maintained eye contact with Renee with the level, unrelenting regard of someone who needs no backup for what they are about to say. "Is Ms. Gloria Vasquez. She is the regional manager of this district. She is the person responsible for this store's operational standards, its staffing, its performance reviews, and its customer experience metrics. She oversees 11 locations, including this one. She has been in this industry for 19 years. And she was here tonight, on her own time, after a 9-hour workday, buying 7 items to take home to her daughter. The store was very quiet. Not the ambient quiet of normal operations. The particular, suspended quiet of a space in which a large number of people have collectively and simultaneously stopped what they were doing. Jess continued. Her voice had not changed in volume. It had not needed to. "She said nothing to you during your entire exchange. She completed her transaction. She was gracious to the other customer in line. And she was leaving." Renee's mouth opened. Closed. "I watched you make a comment about her medical condition," Jess said. "I heard what you said about her ability to manage the transaction. I heard all of it." Silence. "Your loyalty membership account will be flagged and suspended pending review. You are welcome to contact customer service to dispute that. But for tonight, I am going to ask you to complete your purchase at the service desk, where someone will assist you, and then I am going to ask you to leave the store." She said the last sentence with the same tone as the rest. Not a punishment. A fact. A thing that was simply true now. Renee looked around at Marcus, who was looking at his register. At the floor supervisor who had arrived and was standing at a respectful distance with the patient. Settled look of someone who is present as a formality because no further force is going to be necessary. At the 2 customers behind her in line, who were not making eye contact with her. At the woman in the olive fleece who was standing near the exit and who was looking back at her. Not with satisfaction, my mother would tell me later. Not with triumph. With something more complicated. Something that, If you were feeling generous, you might almost call sorrow. The sorrow of someone who has seen this kind of person before and understands in some deep and tired way that they are everywhere, that there will always be more of them, and that the 30 seconds you are watching right now, however clean, however perfectly timed, will not fix that. But it was still 30 seconds. And those 30 seconds mattered. Renee Calloway gathered her tote. She did not go to the service desk. She walked through the front entrance with her chin level and her heels clicking and everything about her posture communicating, to anyone watching, that she was leaving on her own terms, that this was her choice. Everyone watched her go. The automatic doors slid shut behind her. Marcus exhaled. The floor supervisor walked back to the rear. The store resumed its ordinary sounds. Carts, registers, the bakery announcement system, the ambient rhythm of a Thursday evening at the grocery store. And my mother stood near the exit with her canvas bag and her faded sunflower and her medical alert bracelet and looked at Jess Callahan from across the store, and Jess looked back at her, and what passed between them was not something that required 30 seconds. It required approximately 2, and it was enough. For the first 11 days after it happened, my mother did not tell me about it. I knew something had occurred. I knew it the way you know things about people you have lived beside your entire life. Not through evidence exactly, but through the texture of them, through the specific way they are quiet, the specific way they put down a cup, the specific way they look out the window in the kitchen when they think you are not watching them. She was quieter than usual. Not sad quiet, something else. The quiet of a person processing something they are not yet ready to put into words. I did not push. She has taught me over 17 years of living together in this particular configuration. Just the two of us, just us against everything, that there is a difference between the privacy that is distance and the privacy that is preparation. She was not moving away from me. She was moving toward something she wanted to say correctly. On the 12th evening, she made chamomile tea and set a cup in front of me on the kitchen table and sat down across from me and told me. She started at the beginning, the 9-hour workday, the 3 stores, the warm refrigerator case, the misaligned end cap, the parking lot, the sunflower bag. She told it the way she tells things, without drama and without self-pity, in clean sequential sentences that let the facts carry their own weight. She told me about the line, and the elderly man in the veteran's cap, and Marcus and his careful jaw. She told me about the sigh, the tote, the actual places to be. When she got to the part about the medical condition comment, she paused. Just for a moment. Her hands tightened slightly on the mug. I thought about you, she said. I looked at her. What do you mean? When she said it, in that moment, I thought about you at home. She looked at the mug. Not in a sad way. Just, I thought, Danny is at home waiting for dinner, and I am in a grocery store, and this is a woman who does not know me, and I do not have to take what she says into my body and carry it home with me. She paused. So I didn't. I sat with that for a moment. Did it work? I asked. She considered it honestly. Mostly, she said. She told me about the smile she gave the elderly man in the veteran's cap. She told me about the 3 steps toward the door. She told me about hearing her name, her full name with her title, said in Jess Callahan's voice across the front end of the store she has been responsible for the past 3 years. What did it feel like? I asked. To hear your name said like that. In that moment. She thought about it for a long time. Long enough that I thought she might not answer. It felt like being found, she said finally. Not rescued. I wasn't in danger. But found. Like someone saw me standing there in the wrong story and said, no, wait, we know who you actually are. We know what you have actually done. We know where you actually belong. She looked at me. And that's a strange feeling. To be found in a place you thought you were invisible. I did not have words for a moment. Are you okay? I asked, because sometimes that is the only question. She reached across the table and put her hand over mine. Her hands were warm from the mug, slightly rough, steady at this hour, when she had eaten properly and rested and sat at her own table in her own kitchen with the person she loves most in the world. I am very okay, she said. She told me about Renee leaving, about the doors closing, about Marcus's exhale, about the store returning to its ordinary sounds. She told me that Jess Callahan had walked across the store to where she was standing near the exit and had spoken to her quietly. Just the two of them, out of the remaining line's earshot, had asked if she was all right, had apologized on behalf of the store and on behalf of herself. "I'm sorry I didn't get there sooner," and my mother had told her with complete sincerity that she had nothing to apologize for, that she had handled it with precision and dignity, that she should be proud of herself. She told me that on the way out, the elderly man in the veteran's cap had been standing near the exit arranging items in his reusable bags, that he had looked up at her as she passed, that he had nodded at her, one slow, deliberate nod, with the expression of someone communicating something they cannot say and no does not need to be said. She had nodded back. She had walked through the automatic doors. She had sat in her car in the second row of the parking lot for approximately 4 minutes before starting the engine. Not because she was upset, but because sometimes things need a moment to settle before you are ready to take them with you into the rest of your evening. Then she had driven home. She had made chicken thighs and brown rice. I had eaten it at the counter and complained about calculus. She had listened with her whole attention, the way she always listens, like what I am saying is the most important thing in the room. She had washed the dishes. She had gone to bed. She had not said a word. I have been thinking, since she told me this story, about what it means to be a person like my mother. I have been thinking about it the way I think about things that matter, not all at once, not in a single sitting, but in the way water works on stone, slowly and continuously, returning to it when I am not expecting to. She has been a single mother since I was 3 years old. I do not remember my father. I have no strong feelings about this in either direction. It is simply the shape of my life, the way the kitchen table has 2 chairs and not 3, the way it has always been just the 2 of us making it work with what we have. And we have always had what we need. Not always what we wanted, not always without difficulty, but always what we needed. She made sure of that every single day for 14 years without asking me to notice, without framing it as sacrifice, without placing the weight of it on me as something I should carry. She has never told me that her job was difficult. I knew it anyway, knew it from the early mornings, the long drives, the dinners eaten standing at the counter at 8 p.m., the phone calls she took in the car, the clipboard she sometimes brought home and set on the kitchen table and looked at with the focused expression of someone doing serious work. But she never framed it as difficulty. She framed it as the work, which was something she loved, something she was good at, something she had built from nothing through years of learning and showing up and caring about the details that most people walk past. She has never told me that she was tired. I knew it anyway. She has never asked me to feel sorry for her. She would be horrified if I did. What she has done, and what I understood, sitting across from her at the kitchen table on the 12th evening after it happened, watching her hands around the chamomile mug, is this. She has spent 17 years teaching me how to carry myself. Not with words. With the specific, particular, repeated demonstration of what it looks like to encounter something ugly and not become ugly in response. To be in pain without becoming cruel. To be diminished by someone who does not see you and walk away from it with your sense of self entirely, stubbornly, courageously intact. I have watched her navigate 100 situations that would have broken the composure of more brittle people. I have watched her be spoken over in meetings, watched her manage condescension from people who assume she had not earned her title, watched her absorb the particular kind of subtle dismissal that women, and women who look like her, and women who do not dress in expensive clothes, encounter with a frequency that most people who do not experience it find difficult to fully believe. I have watched her receive all of it without becoming hard, without building the armor that would protect her at the cost of the warmth that is one of the most essential things about her. She is not a saint. I want to be clear about that too. She has a temper held deeply in check. She has opinions about things that she shares with the dry, precise wit of someone who has been observing human behavior for a long time and finds it simultaneously exhausting and genuinely funny. She makes mistakes. She overthinks. She works too hard and rests too little and keeps too much of her own difficulty private because she has spent so long protecting me from the weight of it. But she is good. In the specific, unglamorous, daily, unrewarded way that goodness actually operates. Not in grand gestures, but in the faded sunflower on the canvas bag. In the smile given to a stranger in a veteran's cap who needed to see that someone was still standing. In the glucose tablet taken quietly and without theater. In the choice made in real time under real pressure, not to put down on someone else what someone had put down on her. I think about Renee Calloway sometimes. I think about what she went home to that evening, whether she told her husband what had happened, how she framed it, whether she was capable of sitting with the discomfort of what she had done or whether she immediately reconstructed it into a story in which she was still the wronged party. I think about the life she has built inside a story that told her she was the most important person in every room she entered. I think about what it costs to live inside that story. Not the consequence cost, the internal cost, the cost of never once being surprised by someone who turns out to be more than you assumed. My mother has never lived inside that story. She has lived inside the real one. The one where anyone in any checkout line might be carrying something you cannot see, might have already done more before 9 a.m. than you will do in a week, might be someone whose name, spoken clearly and with its full title, causes an entire grocery store to go quiet. The one where dignity is not assigned by what you wear or what you drive or what your tote bag costs. The one where it turns out that the quiet woman with the trembling hands and the faded sunflower bag was, all along, the most important person in the building. Not because of her title, not because of what justice required the store manager to say, but because of how she chose to stand when someone tried to make her small. She chose to stand exactly as herself. She chose to smile at an old man in a veteran's cap. She chose to put the bread in last, gently, so it wouldn't get crushed. And then she went home and made dinner. And I ate it at the counter, complaining about calculus. And she listened to every word. That is who my mother is. And no one, not a coral blazer, not a designer tote, not a voice calibrated to carry, will ever, for a single moment, be able to take that away from her.